Hi, listeners. Welcome to It's the People, an interview series where we explore the inside story of building companies and investment portfolios with high-octane founders, limited partners, and fund managers. We hope these conversations push you to be even better at what you do. This week, my partner Andy Greenfield and I had the opportunity to interview an exceptional entrepreneur, Marc Bernstein, who is the co-founder and CEO of Balto Software, the #1 real-time technology for contact centers that has analyzed over 60 million calls and helped thousands of professionals. We discussed a broad range of topics, including whether entrepreneurs are born or built, transitioning from sales to CEO, when it's time to be nice and when it isn't, what it's like to transform an industry and then to play a catalytic role in doing it again, and so much more. Before we begin, I want to note that this interview is for informational purposes only, and that the opinions expressed should not be relied on as a basis for investment decisions. TIA Ventures is a seed-stage fund focusing primarily on early-stage B2B technology companies, with an obsessive focus on end customers and early-stage teams. To kick it off, Marc, why don't you just give us, 60 seconds about who is Marc Bernstein?
Oh, geez. Who is Marc Bernstein? Well, I am the founder of Balto here in St. Louis. That's kind of, I guess, the main identity that I have nowadays, because when you found a company, that's kind of who you are. And I grew up in the Washington, D.C. area, a little suburb called Chevy Chase, sandwiched between Bethesda and Washington, D.C. Came out to St. Louis for school, undergrad at WashU in St. Louis, and I studied entrepreneurship, marketing, and psychology. After just a couple years in the B2B tech world and the sales world, I noticed a problem that was killing me on my sales calls, and I wanted to solve for others, and quickly started a company. So now I'm 28, and we have over 100 people at the company, and we are aggressively moving to build $1 billion company.
Well, Marc, thank you for the intro. Let me start out by saying that we think you're crazy. And here's why. You are formerly a personal trainer, and from what we know, you're not 220 pounds of rippling steel, 6'3" tall, etc. So you're an underdog there. You're a nice guy in a world of sharp-elbowed entrepreneurs. You're in St. Louis. You're not in Silicon Valley or New York. You didn't go to Harvard or Stanford. You went to school in the Midwest. And you're competing against billion-dollar valuation companies, big behemoths with hundreds of millions of dollars of cash. So, where's this come from? Are you crazy? Do you have a chip on your shoulder? Help us understand that you're not insane.
Yeah. So I think that everything looks insane if you look at it from the macroest of macro perspectives. When you look at all of those variables together, you go, whoa, that is a completely unconquerable challenge. And I'm focusing on the last bit about going up against folks who have hundreds of millions of dollars in cash and billion-dollar valuations. But when you look at the micro level, and the micro level, I think for a lot of fast-growing tech companies should be very simply, what is the problem you're solving? When you look at the problem you're solving, and you notice that no one else is solving the problem, and then you build a solution, and your solution solves that problem better than all the other solutions, that's the fuel you need to get to the next milestone and to be able to hire, new engineers and build a bigger and better product and advance your go-to-market and, have more marketing dollars and more sales dollars. And, it's a race. Because it's a race to capture as much market share as you can when you're building a tech company like Balto, it means that if you can just get a couple years head start, then you can take away the whole thing. And it doesn't matter whether you're a $1 billion company or whether you're a $10 million company. The company that has built a raving customer base and a great product and a good go-to-market strategy is the one that, often can pull away. So I think it's a matter of just looking at the problem like in a very micro sense, and then all of that doesn't feel so scary.
And that's a nice answer. And you've jumped right up to today. But let us push you a little bit here, because you're a guy who you grew up in the East Coast. You end up, you're a personal trainer. And as I said, people walk into gyms and they're looking for the guy who looks like, if you remember Fabio or Arnold Schwarzenegger or whoever. You're not that guy. You're doing a startup. And most people say, oh, great, I'm going to go to go to Silicon Valley. I'm going to go to New York. I'm going to go to some hub. And you go, no, I'm going to stay in the town I went to college in. So what's inside of Marc Bernstein that says, you know what? No, forget the conventional wisdom. I don't care. Or maybe you do care.
Andy, so I'll push back on the exact example you gave of what you're looking for in a personal trainer. First of all, people usually aren't looking for personal trainers. They're not usually going out saying, I'd like to go find one. Usually what happens is someone talks to you and says, hey, how are your goals going? But in a not salesy, sleazy way. And you say, honestly, not great. You say, why is it not going great? And they say this, this, and this. And you say, well, if those things aren't going great, I could just give you one recommendation or one idea that would help that go better. And then they put your recommendation or idea in place to go, whoa, that person just helped me and it was free. And now we have a little bit of trust. So I think that analogy, people aren't looking for the biggest personal trainer they can possibly find. They're looking for the one that cares about them. They're not looking for the company. They don't go on the website and say, okay, let's make sure you're located in Silicon Valley before I buy your technology. They're looking for the technology that solves their needs. So I think people often way over index on things that are very visible and things that are very flashy. And visible and flashy often does build momentum and does have benefits. And I think, by the way, it's one of the things you don't get in St. Louis and you don't get when you're 28 is being able to bring high visibility and high flashiness to the org early. But then you build an awesome product and you build an awesome customer base, and you are able to bring on great talent. And those people can add flashiness that you previously couldn't. So I really think it's a very tangible problem when you just like break it down to its components. I think people focus on the wrong things.
But let me have it. I think that's well said and perfectly well framed, but it's not at all a dodge of what Andy's asked a few times now, but it's not getting at one thought that I'd love your 2 cents on. For me personally, I came out of school, I did management consulting. I was corporate oriented. I did management consulting. I had eyes towards law school, which I never ended up doing. I then did venture capital and then found myself as the first employee of Marquis Jet. And from there, I got entrepreneurship tapped into my veins, and I've never wanted to leave and haven't left. I'd say I was not entrepreneur born, I was entrepreneur built. You yourself, I think, have been entrepreneurial earlier. Were you always going to be an entrepreneur, or do you think that you found this idea organically working in a sales organization and realizing real time would be better, and thus you're just living out the idea? Or are you just, you're going to bring this to the moon and do it again and again and again because you're just entrepreneur born?
So I don't consider myself entrepreneur born. And in fact, I'd say, one of our other founders and COO, Chris, I do consider entrepreneur born. Ever since he was 6, his family would sit around the kitchen table and say, so we're going to build businesses together. We're a business building family. And he grew up knowing I want to be a business builder. The way I got into building a personal training business is I loved physical fitness. I kept learning about it. I wanted to learn more and more and more. And then I said, here's these really cool guys walking around the gym with this trainer sticker on the back of their shirts. I want one of those. So I said, let me go get a certification. I got a certification. Said, great, I'm certified now. What do I do with this? And I was like, well, I guess I should train people. So I sent out an email to the community listserv, the BCC, Bethesda Chevy Chase listserv. And I sent an email saying, hi, I'm a personal trainer. I'm 18 years old and just about to go to school at WashU. So you can assume that I'm like reasonably smart and it won't totally screw up your body. And I'm offering personal training, lessons for $20 an hour. Can't beat that, can you? So if you want a hungry, young personal trainer who knows a thing or two and can give you super affordable personal training, I'd love to hear from you. And I immediately got 8 responses. So I had 8 clients in a day from sending out an email on this listserv. So I didn't go into it thinking I want to build a 100 client personal training company and hire a team of 5 trainers around the Washington, D.C. metro area. I said, I want to do some more personal training because I have this certification. How do I do it? So that's very similar to how Balto got started, where I started the company by building an Excel macro for myself. Because I kept screwing up my calls, and I was like, if I want some reminder that helps me do a better job in my calls, why don't I build an Excel macro? So I built an Excel macro, and then, one thing turned another, and then we started doing a business plan, and then we ended up getting a 75 square foot place in a co-working space here in St. Louis. So I kind of fell into it. But one of the things I think you guys are getting at that I think is a good observation is I think I do have a lack of fear. I think that's really important. I think a lot of people are afraid to one, take risks because they seem very scary, but actually the negative consequences if the risk doesn't go well aren't that bad. And the second thing I think people are afraid to do is go against the grain. And honestly, I've had to rein that in a lot. As I've been, growing and maturing, going through college and the business world, because in the beginning I would go against the grain and I didn't realize the people-centric, emotionally intelligent way to do that. There'd be a meeting and everyone would voice their thoughts and then it would go around the circle, get to me, and I'm like, you're all wrong. And, you get bit by that a couple times, and then you read Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People. And you then read Stephen Covey's, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, and you kind of go down that route for a little bit and you go, shoot, I need to communicate to people in ways that make them feel good. And so that's a way that you can go against the grain, that you can do something that other people aren't doing, but do it in a way where people accept your ideas and want to champion them themselves. So I think the lack of a fear is maybe a personality trait that I bet a lot of entrepreneurs do have. And that's the thing, is when you're 23 and you have no responsibilities whatsoever besides to keep yourself alive. And, you have a job that you really like, but what's the risk? What's the risk of starting a company? You spend a couple years, it doesn't work, you chew up all your savings, but you still have 30 years of your career left or more. So, and your, 23 to 25-year-old years are not your high earning years either. So let's go get an experience that's new and that's valuable, and let's go do that because the risk isn't so bad. So that's kind of how I viewed it, but I really haven't viewed it like entrepreneurship in my veins from day one. I kind of just fell into each one of the opportunities.
Well, Mark, that's very nice. And I know we're not supposed to disagree with our guests, but I'm going to have to wrestle with you on this one because you just described what a real entrepreneur is. As you're speaking, I'm thinking, here's a guy who embodies the Nike, just do it. You see a problem, you just do it. And I smile when you talked about, people sitting around the table coming up with business ideas. There's a line, I think Wills may have said it, 99% of the people he's met on earth have had good ideas, some great ideas, but only a tiny fraction of them have gotten out of their chair to make those ideas real. That's what entrepreneurs are. You said something else about fearlessness, which is, I'm guessing most entrepreneurs, and I'd love to your perspective on this, don't necessarily look in the mirror and go, I am fearless. They just go do So that's one thing I'd love your thought on. And the second thing is an observation, not the comment. But when you were touching before on, the sort of style, the flashiness and stuff like that, sometimes the way we describe you is 100% beef, no filler, um, you know, all substance there. So the fearless thing, I mean, do you look in the mirror and go, who's bad? Or is it more, I'm just going to do this thing?
Little of both. Little of both. So first of all, I'll give credit where credit is due. When I started Balto with Chris Contes, I told him no 3 times. He said, Mark, let's go start this business. And I said, I love my sales job. I'm happy. This is great. I don't need to go start a business. And Chris said, oh, come on, you got to think about it. 3 times I said no. So can I say that my entrepreneurial drive just did it and started the business? No, I was friction. I was the e-brake on that. I got lucky. I got lucky that, somebody else in that moment was the energy and was the momentum that allowed this whole thing to happen. So I think one of the things that entrepreneurs often don't, when they're writing all of their attributes on the wall and they say, I'm good at this, I'm good at this. I don't think lucky gets in the mix often as it should. And I think there really is luck. And yes, you create it, you create your own opportunities. It's wonderful, but there's some times where you just didn't do anything and you just got lucky. And I certainly had a handful of lucky breaks that, allowed Balto to get where we are today. And then in terms of the fear, I think that the practical side of it is that it is a comfort with whatever the downside scenario is. Like whenever people are like, oh, wouldn't that be awful? I'm like, I don't think it'd be that bad. So, and whenever I hear people complain about the weather, oh, it's so hot. I'm like, it's hot. Sometimes it's hot. Sometimes it's cold. It's hot right now, So it's like it's not getting flustered by things that other people may find, uncomfortable. But then as you develop and as your business grows and as you stack on more wins, you do start to do some chest beating. I think that as long as you keep that in perspective, it's a good thing. You should recognize, hey, where am I doing great? And I'll tell you, I give myself performance evaluations on a 1 to 5 scale, like I do for the folks on our team. And I won't tell you the number now, but I have a number. That being said, you should be realistic about the things that you're doing great at. And I think that's really important. And, that is not arrogance. 1, if it's real. And 2 is if you don't behave inappropriately because of it. If you recognize things you're doing great at and then say, and here's things I'm not doing great at, and I'm not going to, run around making other people feel bad because of how great I am at X, then I think it's like a healthy balance of being proud of the things you've done and also, being realistic about where you have to improve. And one of the pieces of advice that you guys have given me quite a bit is also like, enjoy the journey, enjoy the ride. And if you're not at least a little bit proud when something great happens and you produce a new milestone, then maybe you're thinking a little bit too far ahead and not taking a step back from time to time and enjoy what you've done.
Kenny Dichter, who was my boss and co-founder of Marc and now Wheels Up, which they just took public a few weeks ago, he had a literal rabbi around in the Marquis days, and Shalom Dukman, he's very big in Chabad. And he had a line that stuck with me for 15 years now. The more real you get, the more unreal it gets. And, when you sit here and talk about giving yourself self-assessment and scoring yourself and constantly challenging, and it makes me think macro of who was Marc when we first met 2 or 3 years ago and who you are today, not per se as a person, because I think you're the same person, but as a leader, as an entrepreneur, as a visionary, I think you've grown and evolved tremendously. And I think it's because of not accidental. I think it's because of a lot of work that you have and continue to do on yourself and benchmarking. How, I guess twofold is what could you share that has worked and does work, what doesn't work? And as someone who's under constant time pressure, because there's endless work to be done for your business, how do you mentally divide Marc time versus business time?
So the first thing in terms of what works, it's actually, I think, the word that you said, Randy, benchmarking. You have to know what else is out there. You have to know the people, I've been doing this now for 4.5 years. Somebody who is also great and also learning and growing and also a visionary, what does that person look like after 6 years? You need to know what they look like and how they act and what they say and how they think. So I think that the key is always looking for the next tier of performance. And that requires an openness to change. It requires realism about where you are now. And it requires a hunger to want to keep growing and want to keep making yourself better. So I think that it's a very simple formula. It's go look for people who are great, be open to what they're doing, and then go do some of it. So I think that that's probably the most important thing there. And then in terms of balancing, Marc time versus business time, obviously it's hard and there's no clear solution. I do think about sharpening the saw all the time. And, when I'm doing Marc time, is it purposeful? So I actually have a sticky note right here and it says life plan. And it's very simple. And it says Balto, fiance, fitness. And then there's a little section below that says decompress. So what are the things that I want to purposefully be doing in order to decompress? Chess, social time, reading, cooking, chores, and podcasts, and occasionally listening to Netflix. And then I also want to be doing one annoying thing at a time, right? Like going to the DMV. I always have to have one annoying thing that I got to do because otherwise I'm not being productive. So you just plan it out ahead of time. You say that's those are the things that are forms of decompression that are getting away from the business that I think still holistically contribute to me being the best that I can for myself and for the company.
Yeah, that's super helpful to hear. And, you may or may not know, Marc, when we speak about you, one of the, first things we say, we think you're a great CEO, great. But we also say he's just an incredibly nice guy. And, I'm blessed because my partners, Wills and Randy, are incredibly nice guys. I think I'm a nice guy. But if I'm being honest, and I've been an entrepreneur my whole life, if I could rebuild myself, I wouldn't be quite as nice. I'd be tougher. I'd be maybe a little more cold-blooded. I think I would have actually been more successful. And I'm curious, is it hard to be a nice guy? And now you're leading 100+ people building a company that's heading towards $1 billion. Is Marc Bernstein too nice?
Yes, but that's a place for growth and a place to get better. And here's the thing is, I too nice, you can kind of unpackage that, right? You can say there's nice in treating other people well. No, I'm not too nice in that I treat other people too well. That's a good thing that everyone should do. And then there's nice in terms, and I think that the kind of the subtext is occasionally makes decisions that are not optimal because they're thinking about how other people will feel instead of what is going to advance the best outcome in the world. And that's true. That's something that I need to do better. So, but that being said, when I'm around cold-blooded reptiles like you guys, right? That's the best way to get a little bit of ice in your veins.
Oh boy. That's I'm going to put that description up on the wall.
Testimonial.
I haven't been called cold-blooded yet today, so I appreciate that.
His children are still sleeping. That's why.
If only that were the case.
Fulfilled your quota early.
Two, I guess, related questions. Beyond nice, what's a skill set you are looking to add? If we were doing a follow-up a year from now, 2 years from now, what's a skill set you hope to have added to your repertoire? And then looking even further out, you're at a time, it's time to, write your own epitaph. What is it you wanted to say? And, would it say it now, or is there still work to be done for what you really would, in a perfect world, would want it to say?
I'll definitely do those two questions separately, because that second one could be the rest of the podcast. But the first one of what are the other skills I want to add over the next year or so, I think probably the biggest one is going to be honing my sense for when the right answer is to defer to others or defer to the group, and when the right answer is say, hey folks, this is what we're doing. And it's a very difficult sense, because anytime you say, hey folks, this is what we're doing, you are explicitly going against two common adages of wisdom. One is that other people know things you don't know, so you should listen. And, and the second is that, the group is greater than the individual. And you're going against that wisdom, and you're saying, I don't even want to hear what other people have to say, because I want to do it, my way. Or are you saying, well, I want to hear what everyone has to say and then make the decision individually? And obviously both of those are different processes, because the second one, takes, let's say you have a, 5-person or 7-person leadership team, 7 times as long. And, you have to decide at what point in the thought process do you bring those people in? Do you bring them in after you've had the grand thought, and now you're bringing them in and they're refining your thought? What if their thought is very different than the big grand thought you had? Do you totally change your direction, or do you just try to spice their thoughts into yours? Or do you, the second you're about to have a grand thought, say, wait, nope, I don't want to have this thought without the group? And obviously that's not the right answer in most cases. So I think just like refining the balance of when do you bring in a group and listen to a group? When do you just, do it yourself? And what are all the different nuances around when and how and who? I think that's something that I want to continue to work on over the next year.
How do you, and I don't want to lose the second part of the question, but how do you benchmark and how do you score that? It seems so unique to your situation that it's hard to compare someone else's situation, even if you think they're really good at it.
2 ways. One is, again, talking to other people who are really good at it. I'll hear how they do it. And then the second way is, well, in what ways should my situation be more similar to theirs, right? Why is my situation the unique, special one that no one else could possibly replicate? There's definitely somebody who is either in the situation I'm in, or that I should be more in the situation they're in. And so there's room to move there. I think that's really important. Is it's not just like I need to go through this individual journey, or I personally figure out how to take feedback and also champion my own ideas. It's like it's been done a million times, and I have to figure out like which system do I want, because it's a system. There's patterns behind it, and I don't think it's like an individual snowflake that can't be replicated.
Let's shift gears. We heard a rumor you're the CEO and founder of a company called Balto, so maybe we should talk a little bit about that. Let's turn the clock back 4 or 5 years. There's a big, beautiful market in post-call analytics. And a lot of people who are going to start a company would turn and go, you know what? I'm just going to do it better than them. I'm going to poach their clients. But we already have an established buying environment for post call. Real time didn't exist. Like, what happened? Like, why would you go and do something where, no one out there was buying it yet? Instead of saying, you know what, let's shoot for that big, juicy target. I mean, we opened up by saying, are you a little crazy? I don't know. Was that, it seemed to work out okay now, but 4 or 5 years ago, I think it sounded kind of nuts.
It was the solution. There was a problem, and you look at the current solution, and the current solution, post-call analytics, didn't solve the problem. So there wasn't another solution. That was the solution. So we put the solution in place, and Andy, we pitched 82 people before we got our first sale, because we didn't do free trials. We have a very strong no free trial culture at Balto, because we want our customers to respect us as business partners. And in return, it frees us up to do our best work, knowing that, we're not on the chopping block. So we have a no free trial culture. So we pitched 82 paid pilots at the time. And we had someone say yes on the 82nd person. So we had a solution, and we asked people, would you buy this? And everyone said no. And we pulled out the old trusty lean startup book and said, all right, what happens when they say no? You flip to the page and it goes, you iterate. So we say, well, what would make you say yes? And that is, again, bringing in some sales knowledge, which is that when people are saying no, there's specific reasons that they're saying no. And if those things were to change, it's all on a spectrum. There's enough things you can change to get them to say yes. So imagine, the commonly most focused on lever that people look at is dollars and money. So they say, what if I gave it to you free? And if someone says no, if you give it to them free, it means that there's not enough value. Well, you could theoretically take that lever in the other direction and be like, would you use Balto if I paid you $20,000? I think we would have gotten a lot of customers from negative $20,000. So there's all these different pieces that you can move around in order to get someone who's saying no to say yes. And we had a solution. So the question is, how do you move around the pieces in the right way that people want to try this solution? And we did. And you also have to find somebody who is particularly open to being the first one to try a solution and paying for it. And that's a very special type of person. So we're always really grateful to our early customers, because they're unique and they made it happen. Did that kind of answer your question? I don't know if I went in a different direction.
Yeah, I'm smiling listening to it, because it's ringing little bells in my head. I love, after 81 at bats, we got on base on the 82nd. Back when I started my online research company, it was the first one on the planet, and every sales call I made for months, people would say, this internet thing is interesting, but it's really for techies. We're after a mass market. And to hear those words today, you'd roll over, splitting your side, laughing. But what's interesting is hearing the relentlessness, that theme of fearlessness. Just we know it's right, which leads to a question that we think a lot about, particularly in our business, because we're trying to do what they said Wayne Gretzky was great at. Invest in companies that are, building for where the puck is going, not for where it is. So if we take a look at Balto, we all believe real time is where it's at, but we know how fast the world changes. So if you can put on your seer hat, your Nostradamus hat, and look down the road, 5 years, 10 years, we're in a dynamic world. What's gonna be? Is Balto going to be relevant in 5 or 10 years, or is it we're living in a world where there are no humans doing selling anymore.
So first of all, I'll leave it to you, Andy, to bring a Nostradamus reference.
I'm a philosopher. I have to use something.
And I him so.
Yeah. So congratulations, you filled your quota today too. So the answer I'd have for you is of course, Balto will be relevant, because you don't build a company with the expectation that the company won't be needed or necessary in 5 to 10 years. So the question then is how? And is our technology in the current state going to be what is predominantly used to make sales and customer service people awesome? Will it be a different state? And the answer is that nobody knows. We have our seer hat. We have a vision. We have predictions of where we think things are going to go. But what a great organization needs is being highly observant to where things are going. And if you look at the puck once and you go, great, I'm going to skate there, and you close your eyes and skate there, and it took you 10 seconds and everyone's been doing a full hockey game in those 10 seconds, the puck is probably not going to be there. So you need to continue to look at it and look at it and look at it and look at it. And then with each movement that the puck makes, make your best guess. So there is no question that machines will be helping organizations go to market. No question. And then the question is how? And we think we have a really awesome formula that help organizations go to market. And we think that what we say, the atomic unit of business, is the conversation with the customer. And the conversation can be a digital one. And we even say that being on a website is a conversation of sorts. It's just one that you planned out ahead of time, where you planned out what you were going to say, and then the customer kind of did a back and forth, where it's almost like a bat using sonar bouncing off all of your different signals. But it's a conversation where you're communicating with the customer and they're communicating back with you as they take various actions on your website. So we say that the conversation with the customer is the atomic unit of business. And that, we want to scale excellent conversations to the full organization with the push of a button. So we're going to be where the conversation is, unless there's some world where the conversation no longer matters. But I'll tell you, I can't picture people not wanting things for less money. I can't picture a world where conversations don't matter with the customer.
So leaning into that point exactly, real time, from one lens, it's easy to sit there and say, real-time coaching, your algorithm is getting it right. Your coaching is, at or nearing perfection. The only thing screwing it up is the person taking the coaching and relaying it. And so maybe the next step or the future is getting rid of the person. But as you play that out logically, if this is all about being at that unit of the conversation, maybe you can't get rid of the person until the person on the other end of the phone is also a computer. And then it's just computer to computer. To the extent that it's a person calling, it's still relevant to have a person answering. Is that, not to ask and answer my own question, but I guess that's the novice outsider thinking of this. What's the more nuanced, detailed thinking that you guys have about it?
And that's a pretty good way to think about it. So I don't think that's far off. I was thinking through the other day that the concept of, fully automated sales and customer service agents. And let's say it's a complete robot. How far are we from that? What would you need to do that? And as I thought through the complexity of what's needed to have a fully automated sales and customer service agent, I kind of realized, wait a minute, obviously both, it's going to happen at some point in the future, right? Let's imagine that we go 1,000 years down the line from now. I have to imagine that technology will be available and some organizations will use it. But what's going to happen first, I think, is actually what you mentioned, Randy, which is fully automated coaching and management. Because the point of management is to ensure the performance of the people who you are managing. And I think that the different levers that you have to pull as a manager are in a lot of ways actually easier to automate than the leverage you have to pull as the actual person doing all of the variety of things that you have to do as a sales or customer service agent. So I think that, just like one day, not too long ago, AlphaGo beat the best Go player in the world. I think that there's a day where AI coaching can be better than the best coach in the world and can tell you exactly the things that you need. And you can show an AI coach produces a bigger lift than an equivalent human coach who, is dedicating their full amount of time and attention. And I don't think we're too far off from that. So that's the thing, is I think that it's important that you have to be open to all of the different ways that technology could evolve and the ways that would make your technology that you build and ours at Balto more useful and more relevant, and less useful and less relevant. And you have to see where it's going and make sure that you are building in new pathways so you're always on the more relevant side.
Is there, just playing this out, and then we might go in a different direction. Is there, real time is now an evolution upon post call. Is there a thread of an idea in your head around pre-call being an evolution around real time, or is it just not work that way?
It's in the works. It's not even just an idea. And you can think about what are the things that you wish you would know your customers were going to do. Like, what if you knew for absolute certainty that person's going into this store on this date? What would you do differently? The opportunities are ridiculous. And that's one of the things that AI is very good at, is predictive capabilities. Not with 100% effectiveness, but especially for some portion of cases that are perhaps the most pronounced, AI is very good at saying, this is a highly pronounced case of X and likely to result in these things. So I do think that the next evolution of real time is predictive. And then, you can only go up to the moment that, there's like the natural time only moves in one direction. So you can't go backwards in time. So if you're thinking about pre-call, then there's a whole area there, which is, okay, what information would you want to give an agent or a company before a customer calls in? Imagine you could predict this customer is going to call in the next 2 hours. and you call in and say, welcome, Mr. Brandoff. I understand that you had a pricing question because the technology was able to predict it. So technology and data will be able to do pretty incredible things. And it's just a matter of how fast we get there, because it will happen. It will. You go long enough in the future, it will.
I'm smiling hearing this there. It reminds me of a comic I heard recently who was riffing on Amazon, talking about, there was Amazon 2-day and then Amazon 1-day. And now they're having, with drones, Amazon 2-hour. And I just found out Amazon is launching Amazon before. So before you decide you want to order it, it's delivered.
That's Ronnie Chang, and I love that exact special. Killer. And what does he talk about? There was this one bit he tells about how we want it now, and how everything is like, I want it now. It's honestly, there's an emotion you can get from that, which I think is like our inner consumer speaking. I think he captured it super well.
Well, it sounds like it's almost the Balto playbook for the future.
I would not disagree with you.
I guess we're running towards the end of our time together. And Marc, you've been exceptionally insightful and generous. I'm curious about if you wake up and it's, 4 or 5 years from now, Balto has, continued to do a great job, maybe 6 or 7 years, you've sold it, you have no particular worries in your life financially. And the doctor comes in and says, Mark, you can no longer be an entrepreneur. Just can't do it for whatever reason. What does Mark Bernstein end up doing? Because now you've got means, you've got, internal motivation, because you're the kind of guy who's not going to, probably not going to sit on a couch eating bonbons watching Oprah reruns, but, or maybe you will. But what is Mark Bernstein going to do?
There would be at least a year of reading, spending time in nature, and sitting in a cabin in the mountains. There would be at least a year of that. Then I think what would, because when you say entrepreneur, I wonder whether you're also counting, like research and nonprofits. Am I allowed to start things in general?
That DNA is manifesting itself once again.
Yeah, if I'm allowed to start things, then the question is, what's the next thing I'd start? And I don't know. I love space travel. I think space travel is fantastic, and just a really cool like evolution of people and what we're doing as a species. I think that the income inequality that we have, and I'm talking about the United States in this country, is just, it's a truly unfair playing field for so many people. And I was talking to my fiance about this last night, actually, and just very simply, like, it is indisputable that a large portion of the people in this country did not start from the same place. There's clearly a large portion of people in the United States that were born into circumstances that were not as good as other people's circumstances. And that's clear. And what circumstances were they born into? Maybe less access to high quality education, less access to hands-on parenting, less access to nutritious food. But it's very clear that not everyone has the same opportunities. And they never will. Like, we're never going to have a fully equal world. But I do think that if you're born into a circumstance and right there from day one, like, that is like dictating what opportunities you'll have. Like, that's something that we don't stand for as a country. Like, we need to, what the United States stands for, I think, is the opposite of that, which is no matter, what circumstance you're born into, that we give you the opportunities to succeed and build a wonderful life for yourself and the people that you love. So I think I'd want to do something around, around a little bit less income inequality and trying to find ways that we can give, everybody the ability to pursue entrepreneurship. And I'll tell you just a real quick story. I was in the park just the other day, and there was this young family next to me, and the one of the kids in the family was wearing a T-shirt, and the T-shirt had one line, and it said rapper, and there was a line, it crossed out, so it was strike through, not a rapper, and the next one said basketball player, and it was scratched out, not a basketball player. And the last line, which was highlighted, was entrepreneur. And I ran by them, and I gave them a thumbs up, and I said, entrepreneur. And we all just started cheering together. And we were all just cheering together. And they said, "Do you hear that? That guy running by supports you as an entrepreneur." And I'd like to make sure that everyone has the chance to be whatever they want to be, if they want to be an entrepreneur, or if they want to be a rapper, or they want to be a basketball player. But I want to make sure that everyone has the chance to be what they want to be. And I think that would be a nice evolution, a next step, if there ever is a world where I am 70 years old and not still at the helm at Balto.
Go for it, Mark. That's a great answer, and I think it's eloquent and insightful. And when people start the race, people are not at the same starting line.
I couldn't agree more, but we'd be remiss if we let you go and didn't end this at least talking about the fact or leaning into your experience with dealing with VCs. You are in the process of closing a highly successful Series B with named venture funds. You did so with your Series A, you did so with your seed. And, we know we've been a part of this journey that there's been a steep learning curve. What was eye-opening and surprising about working with VCs? What have you learned that will help you in subsequent rounds? And the third part to the question is, most every VC I've ever met, and I think, present company included, believes they have relevant experience and advice to offer. How do you learn what to take versus when to avoid getting overloaded?
Again, we could do a whole podcast on that.
And we may.
Yeah, we may. So I think that when you're working with VCs, you have to very clearly delineate in your own head, what are the things that I am pretty confident they know that I almost certainly do not know? And what are the things that I know that I'm pretty freaking confident they know? And there are items on both sides of that T-chart. And I think it's very easy to firmly be on one side of the T-chart. And I think that's a mistake a lot of entrepreneurs make, where they say, yeah, I just took the VC's money because I wanted some money. Now I'm going to go build the business the way I wanted to build the business. And it's like, there's stuff on the other side you probably should be looking at. Or the reverse, help me, Mr. and Mrs. VC. You're the all-knowing, successful business person. I'm going to listen to whatever you say. Which, by the way, especially when you're a younger entrepreneur, it's very easy to fall into that side. So I think it's just listing out in your head, what are the things that they know? What are the things that I know? And Randy, that helps you know what advice to take, right? And I developed a rule that I start using now. And it's been tremendously helpful, because there are times where I've gotten advice from VCs and didn't quite understand it. And I was like, if I didn't quite understand it, it must be wrong. It must be, not thoughtful. But what I actually realized is, in a lot of cases, it is 2 steps or 3 steps beyond my current understanding of how to grow and scale a business. And they just didn't bridge the gap, right? So the rule I developed is, if you ever get advice that you don't understand, listen twice. And ask them for the extra layer of clarification. Don't just be like, geez, that makes no sense. It must be wrong. It's like, it makes no sense. Why does it not make sense to me? How did this other smart person come to the conclusion that they came to? So I think just dividing that knowledge of what do they know, what do you know, and being very realistic about what's on both sides of that T-chart, I think, is the biggest thing that I've learned from VCs. Because if I were just to list out all the individual learnings I've gotten from them, I mean, it would be, we would not end on time. So I think it's just you got to use that algorithm about what info to take and what info not to take.
I love it. Thank you. I'll ask you offline what advice you've taken versus filtered from me, and I'll learn and grow from it myself.
I see a big wall on the side that says sayings of Randy. Mark, as we wrap up, I guess, going back to the original question of entrepreneurs born or made, I remember we had an event up at Colgate. It was a Shark Tank, and up on the dais were the CEO of eBay and Skype and Airbnb and Ashton Kutcher. And Ashton was perhaps the most thoughtful and articulate guy there. And and he has a fund, early stage fund. And they asked him, what are the things that for you are the hallmarks of great entrepreneurs? And he said two things for sure. One is grit, and the other is they're relentless learners. And if I was going to make a Marc Bernstein t-shirt, it would definitely say relentless learner. It would say grit. And you do one other thing, and we've seen it over the years because you've had, challenging situations. You embody the saying, run towards the danger. So, I would have to push back on you and say, I think you were born, not made, as an entrepreneur. Anyway, can't thank you enough. And we look forward to watching you take Balto to the next level and hopefully being part of that chapter.
Thank you too, guys. Thank you for everything. This was wonderful. And, I will say the TIA group has been like a really special part of Balto's growth. And I really mean that. So thank you guys for everything you've done, because the trajectory has been different because of partnering with you.
Thank you very much for that.
And now, write that next chapter. So Balto is going to be where the puck is going.
Let's do it. We'll do another podcast in a year.
There we go. Thanks, Marc.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Marc. Thank you for listening to It's the People with your hosts, Andy Greenfield, Wills Hapler, and Randy Brandoff. As always, you can follow us on Twitter and LinkedIn and at tiaventures.com. That's all for this episode, folks. And remember, it's all about the people.